it's really a bigger platform. I think if California can't save the world, I don't know who can these days. In terms of
that's an interesting thought. Why? What? I've never heard that before. And what makes you say if California can't save the world, then who can? Like what? Yeah. Why do you say that? That's interesting.
We need to make investments to combat the climate crisis and linked things like inequality and racism and so forth, globally. And California has, at this moment in time, the political will, the wealth, and the support of the electorate to do that. Mm-hmm. And you don't find that combination in very many states of the United States. So we really have the opportunity, I think, to be out in front on some of these global challenges.
Absolutely. That's an interesting way of looking at it. And I can't say that, I disagree. You have a lot of problems, but you are, at the forefront of finding solutions. And we'll get into the solar aqua grid a little later. But in terms of like water, right? A lot of where you're at, especially in the Central Valley, that's a problem. And I'm wondering if you could kind of let us know how big of a problem it is in terms of like wasting water, and like what are some of the solutions that you guys have thought up in order to fix this problem?
Well, water is always something that's been in dispute, I think, mm-hmm. in California. There's an error that says I've run out of disk space.
Oh, you're good. We're pulling this recording. It's actually recording within this software that we're running, so you're all good.
So look at it this way. California receives an average of about 2 feet of precipitation per year across the state. And the state's 100 million acres. So if you convert that to a volume, that's 100 million acre feet, or 200 million acre feet, mm-hmm. 2 feet deep times 100 acres. To of that 200, about 120 million acre feet is used in our headwaters, in our forests. It goes back to the atmosphere to keep the trees healthy and everything else. The ecosystems we depend on. So that leaves 80 million acre feet of runoff. Now, of that 80 million acre feet, half of it flows to the ocean to keep our ecosystems healthy, our Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta. Some rivers you can't put dams on because they're too steep. So that leaves about 40 million acre feet for agriculture and municipalities combined. Now, of that 40 million acre feet, 80% of it goes to agriculture. Mm-hmm. And 20% of it to the urban areas. Now, we have more land than we do water. That 80% of 40 million acre feet is 32 million acre feet on average. It varies from year to year depending on precipitation. And pretty much all of our agriculture is irrigated agriculture because our rain falls in the wintertime, and crops need it in the summertime. So we store it over to summer. So right now, we haven't had much precipitation the last few years, and we're running out of stored water in some areas. We're pumping water out of the ground that may not be replenished.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You're when you say stored waters, you're referring to the underground water aquifers, correct?
Yeah, well, that's the biggest storage, but there's also dams.
Okay,
so both, and another storage is our snowpack, but that's diminishing.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the giant problem now. In terms of, like you said, 80% of that water goes towards agriculture and the other 20% goes to urban areas. Do you think that the state, and again, don't want to point any fingers, I'm just spitballing here. Do you think that some of the the agriculture that has been implemented is problematical. I think that I believe I read somewhere that a lot of the almond groves or orchards take a ridiculous amount of water as well. So that might be problematical. I can't off the top of my head. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But I'm wondering, like, if I could get your thoughts on that.
Well, there's a couple of issues there. First of all, the people that are using the water have a legal right to use the water.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, and almonds are one of our largest agricultural exports. California supplies 80-90% of the world's almonds.
Wow.
And we're exporting a lot of water when we do that. We still, with the water that's remaining, we grow, about a third of the nation's fruits and vegetables and nuts, and over half of just the fruits and nuts.
Wow.
That serves our nation. So yes, we could change the water rights and try to prioritize, but do we want to make societal decisions, or do we want to let landowners make those decisions? Property rights holders, whether they own the land or the water or both.
Yeah. And I don't have no comment there, because I'm going to definitely side with individual liberty and whatnot. But it is an interesting thought process, or an interesting thought that in your opinion, is that a large portion of the problem is that we might not be growing the most suitable produce for the region?
I think that you have to look at it and decide if your worldview is to make society better or to have free property rights.
Yeah.
And let people do what they want. And that's a constant struggle, because in this Constitution of California, water belongs to the people.
Yep.
But people have established water rights to use it. Yet, on the other hand, we have rural communities that don't have water. And we have ecosystems that don't have water rights. So there's a societal interest that's not being met.
Yeah.
With the current system.
Man, okay, yeah, we got into the weeds real quick. We start talking about this is something though that is important, because it's not something for where I live, the region I live in. Water's not really an issue, right? It might be at some point in time, God willing. That doesn't, I don't live through that, and no one else does, but that's not something that I think about in terms of where I live. But like where there's a scarcity of water, that's getting very, very complicated, because you don't want to infringe on someone's liberties, right, and their ability to make a living. Yet, like, if this resource runs out, then no one can live there, and things get real ugly really, really quick. And then, you also said something that I thought was pretty profound, is the ecosystem also is being denied. And if your ecosystem crashes, then not a lot of people can live there. And, so it's complicated.
Well, I think what you're getting at a really good point, that, society as we know it depends on having healthy ecosystems, biodiversity, and so many things we depend on to make life the way it is having healthy ecosystems. And globally, in the United States and California, there's now this 30 by 30 initiative to set aside 30% of our land and coastal waters for its biodiversity value by 2030.
Okay.
It's been embraced, all the way along the chain, from the United Nations down through some states like California.
So does this mean that it turns into like public land, where there'll be like trails and what? I'm kind of confused at what that means. When you say set aside land, does that mean it's state-owned land that everyone can go on, or how does that work?
That means we don't convert it to cropland or infrastructure.
Okay, sweet. So it's a protected area then. All right, much like Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And
you may graze cattle on it or something like that, but you're not doing row crops or something.
Yeah, because that's we that's a reoccurring theme on some of our bummer casts, is when we start talking about the lack of I can't think of the word right now, but monocrop agriculture, and how we don't do crop rotations, and we grow large like hundreds of miles, maybe that's, let's say, thousands and thousands of acres of soy and all these things that just strip the soil of all of its value. Like these are some of the issues that, we have to tackle in the future. One thing, but I don't want to go down that road, because that's a depressing road to go down. But one of the things I did want to ask you, and this is a bit controversial, is what are your thoughts on dams? Because dams are, some people view them as a necessary, evil, and other people view them as like the worst thing ever in terms of like destroying fisheries and whatnot. Like, I feel like when we were first building dams in this country, I don't think we really considered or had the foresight to see the havoc that would have on some of the fisheries and the salmon runs. I think that there was another big. John, you might need to pull this up. I want to say it's like a copper mine in Idaho or something like that, where they were going to dam this river up and it was going to ruin the fisheries. I don't know. It was a huge thing in the hunting community, but I would like to get your viewpoint on what you think of dams. I mean, it's a very, I'm sure it's a complicated issue, and it's got a lot of sides and probably a lot of emotion, but what does Roger think of dams?
Well, right now, dams provide quite a bit of value to the way our cities and society has developed in the Western U.S. and other places. We think about the huge hydropower, the electricity generation on Hoover Dam and other dams.
The Bonneville Dam.
Well, it's the same. Yeah. So we've built up. And those are existing infrastructure. Now, we might not build them. We probably wouldn't build them if they weren't there. Now, when people ask me, I say, I just don't see the people of California voting for a bond to build another dam on a river.
Yeah.
The only dam that's in planning in California is off the river right now, and it's for storage. It's for water storage, potentially hydroelectricity, and also it can release water, as needed for both ecosystem values as well as agriculture. But dams, we built dams in part for flood control, but in part because we wanted to use the floodplains, which is what used to provide flood control. People wanted to farm those. So there were really very strong special interests that wanted to develop the land that were advocates for these dams, and they got the support of enough people that they got Congress and the state legislature to put the money up front
to
build these dams and do the engineering on them. And then they got the water rights to use the water from the dams. So they're there, and we're making the best use of them that we can.
Yeah. All right, I'm picking up what you're putting down there. Okay. So it's fun. It's funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it would cost a lot of money to remove dams. There are 4 dams that are supposed to be removed on the Klamath River next year, and at this point, it costs more to operate them than to remove them. They're not making money for anybody.
Oh, really? Yeah. I sometimes think about more people are switching over to electric automobiles because of the price of gas, and I think that we're only going to see the demand for electricity. But I recently had an interesting conversation with someone that works for a utility company that deals in power, and he mentioned that a big problem that we're going to see is, since people are going to be charging their cars, the demand for electricity is about to go up, and we might not have enough electrical power on the grid to support that. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about and foreseeing, but I definitely would love to know if that's a conversation that's going on in some of your circles.
Oh, it definitely is. And the state of California has projections for how much more electrical capacity and how much more electricity we need to generate to meet the 2030 goals and 2045 goals and so forth of the state. Yet they don't have a firm plan to get there.
I know how we could get there.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Are you ready? I know how we can do it. No problem, no questions asked. Now there's a minor cost. Nuclear energy.
Okay.
I want to get your thoughts on this. I feel like we already have the solution. Nixon had an initiative to have 500 nuclear reactors built across, and then I know it seems crazy, but we're working on getting a nuclear engineer that has designed a new type of reactor to where it self-contains if it were to malfunction, so there wouldn't be barely any issues of nuclear waste. And I just wonder, in the circles that you run in, is this something that people are considering? Because there's been a lot of advancing in this, and I think that as we shift away from fossil fuels, because nuclear fusion with ITER, we've had some experts on here to talk about that. That's whether that goes, fusion is feasible. I believe it is, but it's not there now, and not at the speed that we need it. So I'm thinking that the only real solution that we have would be nuclear, but it has such bad press. And I wonder if is this something that in the circles that you run with that you guys are discussing?
Well, it does come up sometimes in a couple of contexts. And going back to my student days when I was studying economics, I did take besides engineering, I took a degree in economics along the way. And for decades, we looked at the literature, and for decades, the U.S. had no new orders for nuclear power plants because they just don't pencil out in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's multiple reasons for that, but one big reason, there are a couple of big reasons. There's huge capital investments. And you've got to tie up quite a bit of capital to get there. And second, we still don't have a good way to dispose of the waste from the current technology that's out there. And that's a societal cost that not many people are willing to bear. They don't want it in their backyard.
No, I know that's a big, I know that's always a big selling point where someone's like, well, would you live in a place that had a nuclear reactor? I did. I lived in Corvallis. There's a nuclear reactor there, and it didn't seem to bother me. But it's pretty ugly on the landscape, right? I think of the Chernobyl nuclear reactors, and I can't think of any other ones that I've visited, but they seem like they're just massive structures that are kind of an eyesore. So if you could maybe get rid of that, scale it down, maybe we could sell it. I don't know.
Well, I'm not ruling out all nuclear technology. I just can't see. I just can't see us making investments in these expensive, big facilities that take 20 years to build and get online, when we can put solar over our roofs, over our carports, over our canals, over our parking lots at a much lower cost of installed capacity, even including storage, electricity storage. And we can do wind. I mean, I think at this point, solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, geothermal are going to pencil out much better than big nuclear plants using the current technology that people are offering.
I think that's fair. And I think that this is a pretty good segue. But before we get, John, you had something you wanted to say. What was that?
Oh, well, I was just going to bring up that there was just, I believe this past week. Yeah. A few weeks ago, actually, there was a study released by an environmental scientist at Stanford, or a group of scientists at Stanford, that had determined that based on their calculations of GDPs of 145 countries in the world, that if all of the countries total would put all of their effort into making use of whatever renewables we can with the technology we have right now, this isn't dependent on growing and developing new technology, that it would cost roughly $65 trillion to solve global warming, and that because of all of the cost-saving mechanisms that are built into renewable energies, within 6 years we would completely pay off what it would cost to do.
Yeah, I don't know the study you're talking about, John, but it really does pencil out. The benefits are a no-brainer compared to the investments, as long as we make smart investments and put the solar and wind in the right places that don't have huge ecosystem impacts, or ecosystem or impacts such as cultural, because there's been a lot of pressure to put them on Native American land that is of strong interest to Native Americans in some states.
Put what on Native American lands again?
Solar.
Oh, wait, for real?
Not on land that is owned by Native Americans, but that is under some government ownership, but has both ecosystem and sacred value.
Oh, damn! We're doing it again, son of a bitch. That's terrible.
So we got to be smart about where we put our solar and our wind.
Yes, totally understand.